High risk, high reward. Here are 10 great reads for those of you who love a challenge. But can you handle these books? Welcome to Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father and son talk about fantasy, science fiction, horror, and other nerdy things we enjoy. I'm Jim, the father of this show, and thanks for joining me here today as I bring a fun topic your way. If you agree and this is fun, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. Look in the show notes for all sorts of other ways you can connect with my son Zach and I. Through my personal reading experiences, I have found some of the most difficult books and series to get through have ended up being the most rewarding reading experiences of all. Now, that's not always true, but nearly universally. The more it takes, the more you get. So today, I'm bringing forward 10 reading selections that many people just find to be too much to handle, too high an investment. But for those who persevered, the payoffs were enormous, and they might be for you if you can handle them. Will these be too much for you? You'd have to give them a try to find out. And of course, if you are already veterans of some of these, let me know about it in the comment box. Tell me your experience. Do you agree they're amongst the toughest ones to get through, but so worthy? These are not ranked. Everybody has a different experience with them. But let's get to the 10 different ones that I have to suggest. The first one I'm going to talk about simply is Malazan Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. This is a 10-book set, started in 1999, finished in 2011. It's epic fantasy. Why is this one hard to get into, to get through? Well, it's got very non-linear storytelling. You're jumping all over the place. Heck, the first book just drops you into the middle of the story already, and you stumble around trying to figure out what the heck's going on. It also has so many different viewpoints. There's not just one protagonist and you're following that person through a story. Not at all. And the world, it is so vast, so complex. And there's very little exposition. You're just going through and experiencing these things with so many diverse characters. It's amazing, but that makes it really hard to process. There's so much to these 10 books that there's a whole bunch of other books now written, like 16 more in this same world, drawing on the material that was put in here because nothing was finished. It's just parts of an incredible story. But it is absolutely excellent because these deep, multi-layered characters are so rich, so much to value and connect to and enjoy, because the humor, often gallows humor, just is going to make you chuckle again and again. It's also philosophical in many ways. There's depth to this story. Steven Erikson is saying some powerful things through these books. And then there's the battles. There are epic battles. Many of these books finish with just such a flurry, and you're like, oh, at the end. I'm not talking Sanderlanche. I'm talking something massive and impactful and just so well written. Yeah, so that's the first one. The second one, Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. 4 books written from 1980 to 1983, but I also would encourage you to include the follow-up book, sort of a sequel, The Earth of the New Sun. The author actually refers to it as a coda to the series, which came out in 1987. This is science fantasy. It's worthy of being on this list because it's very simply not an easy read. It has a massive vocabulary, some archaic language, some made up words, very rich prose, a lot of symbolic storytelling, so it's not just straightforward and simple to interpret. And the narrator that you're getting the story from is very unreliable. So you really have a tough time figuring out what's going on. Many say you really haven't read this until you start a reread. But it's excellent for that rich prose. I mean, it's a work of literary art. And it has deep themes, memory and identity that many people firmly connect with. And of course, it's got a blend of sci fi and fantasy that has been tough to replicate. I didn't particularly care for this myself, other than to recognize it is a work of art. But I did read all five of those books. And I know many other people who absolutely lift them up as some of the best they've ever read, so I'm putting it on the list. Malazan Book of the Fallen, that's my jam. This one, not so much, but it might be yours. The third one on my list is the entire Chronicles of Thomas Covenant by Stephen R. Donaldson. There are 10 books in this series, an opening trilogy, a second trilogy, and a final quartet. These were written starting in 1977 and finally finishing in 2013. Epic fantasy. It's hard for many people because, well, first of all, the protagonist, Thomas Covenant, is a deeply flawed and often highly unlikable person. So it's hard to get behind him and empathize with him. You just, you don't want to like him. He is so morally ambiguous in his actions that many people just want nothing to do with Thomas Covenant and chuck the book away. The series also features very dense prose. It's beautifully written, but not easy to get through. Again, a book that's tough to process, including philosophical undertones that are going to get you thinking on deeper levels that you might not be there for. And the narrative style, it's a bit unforgiving. It doesn't have time for people who just want simple, weak books. But it's excellent for its profound exploration of concepts like despair, redemption, the power of belief. It's also set in a richly imagined world where moral and existential struggles take center stage. The land, the name of this fantastical place, its lore, and the unique magical elements of it, such as earth power and the power of white gold. They're intricately crafted. Stephen Donaldson was really creative and really thought this stuff out. So not only is it intricate, it's also deeply symbolic. There's many layers to this series, but you got to dive in and you really got to process to fully appreciate it. I've read all 10. I consumed them as fast as I could. The first 6 when they were already out there, and then I got the final 4 as they came out, and just But Zach can't stand this series. I don't think he made it past the first book. Again, will you be able to handle it? My next example is the Dune series by Frank Herbert. And I mean that specifically. Frank's books. So that's the first 6 of all the Dune books that are out there now. These 6 books were published from 1965 to 1985. And they almost complete the core series. There was one more book Frank intended to write before he passed away. The series is concluded by his son and Kevin J. Anderson, working, collaborating together. But not everybody is satisfied with the way they finished it. These 6 books, though, they're pretty incredible. Now, they're also very hard. It's got a lot of dense political intrigue, ecological philosophy, and the world building is very complex. There's a lot to sink your teeth into here. For some people, that's too much. But it was a groundbreaking work of science fiction, delving into power, religion, human potential on a scale that it's hard to find elsewhere. Strongly recommend. The Dune books, they're my favorite of all science fiction. Next, I want to bring you The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. This one's a little contentious. First of all, it's the only one on this entire list that is not yet a completed series. There are 5 books so far, plus 2 novellas, and these were written 2010 through 2024. Just back in December 2024, this 5th book came out. But that's also part of the contention because not everybody was a big fan of that 5th book. People who've loved this series up to this point are practically ready to burn their book. Okay, I don't know if anyone's gone that far, but contentious. The other thing about this series is it's tied to all the other books of Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere collection, which go back to the publication of Elantris in 2005. The Stormlight Archive is epic fantasy. It's hard because of that massive scope. These 5 books are all huge chunkers with extensive world building, a complex magic system, a sprawling cast of characters. That scope is huge. And then you have all the tie-ins to the rest of the Cosmere, where if you haven't read all those other books, you're not getting everything you could out of Stormlight Archive. That's a lot to commit to for some people. It also has some pacing challenges with some of these books. You got to get your way through them before they start to really get good, many people find. But the excellence is the immersive storytelling. We're getting so much from about so many characters who are all interconnected in some complex and creative ways. That magic system that is hard to perhaps process how much there is to it is also very interesting, very well designed. Sanderson is the king of hard magic systems. We didn't even talk about those until Sanderson was on the scene. And then the emotional depth of many of these books, that's why people love them. You get sucked in, engaged with the experience of these characters, their struggles, their relationships, their growth, the challenges that they overcome. This is why people have been so mad about Wind and Truth, because they are so emotionally connected to the series, and some of them feel very let down or even betrayed. Still, it might be worth your time. Now let's talk about my favorite series of all, The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, and completed by Brandon Sanderson. This is 14 books, plus a prequel, a shorter prequel novel, started in 1990, and the series was completed in 2013. This is epic fantasy. What's hard for many people about The Wheel of Time is its enormous length. All of these books are hefty books, and they're full of detailed descriptions. So many characters, over 2,000 named relevant characters woven into this massively complex storyline. But its excellence? Well, this richly imagined epic story with a very satisfying payoff at the end for long-term readers. You just fall in love with that, and people love to reread this series because every time they do, you get more. There's so much excellent foreshadowing from right in book 1 that pays off all the way through. And then these characters, again, you're going to just fall in love with them and their interactions with each other. Amazing. Yeah, you got to commit to a lot, but the payoff's worth it. Now, here's the one that I have not read yet, but Zach has. So my comments on this comes from my co-host. We're talking The Hyperion Cantos by Dan Simmons. 4 books, started in 1989 and finished in 1997. I should be reading them here in 2025. They're high on the to-be-read list. This is science fiction of a space opera-esque style. What's difficult about the Hyperion Cantos is the non-linear structure, again, of its story, with intertwining character arcs that are inspired by the Canterbury Tales, a very classic literary style. But its excellence comes from its rich themes of religion, artificial intelligence, and the nature of storytelling. Zach really appreciated the first book, liked the second book, and the third and fourth were okay. But he didn't regret reading any of them. I look forward to giving them a try, and you might enjoy them too. It is an award-winning series. Probably worth checking out. Now we come to another selection by one of my favorite authors, The Dark Tower by Stephen King. This is 7 novels plus a novella written starting in 1982 and finished in 2012. Quite a span of years. This is a genre mashup of fantasy, horror, and Western. It's unique. I've found nothing else quite the blend that The Dark Tower is. What's hard about it is that genre blending narrative. You're not quite sure what kind of story you're reading at times. And sometimes its timeline is very disorienting. You're not sure where you are in the story, things jump around a bit. Also, because Stephen King wrote this over quite a range of time, he developed as an author as he went. So the tone of the story changes as he grows as an author, and not everybody's on board with that. Some find that a little jarring. The final three books are strikingly different than book one, but its excellence comes from its unique, ambitious blending of westerns, horror, and fantasy into something truly epic. The scope of this story is shockingly aggressive, and what he pulls off is amazing. There are many people who so love The Dark Tower that it's their perpetual reread, and they keep finding more every time they go through it. Not to mention the characters. There are some highly memorable characters in the story, from Roland to Jake, Susanna to Eddie. Yeah, love The Dark Tower. But it's not for everybody. It might be too much for you. I don't know. Now let's go back to science fiction, and I'll give you the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov. 7 books, and check out this span. Started in 1951, finished in 1993. You got an opening trilogy, then there's a 29-year gap before he starts writing Foundation books again. Those 4 more, people thought they'd never get. Fans kept asking and asking and asking, and I don't know, they wore him down. He needed money. I don't know, but they're still fantastic. It's a great series. It's also hard to understand what you're reading sometimes. It's very heavy on ideas and philosophy. The writing style is not that action-packed move you through a story. It's a thinking man's book. It's not character-driven. Okay, if you're looking for that kind of story, that is not Foundation. But its excellence comes from it being a seminal work of science fiction. The concepts that are put into play here are mind-bending. And the scope, again, an examination of the rise and fall of civilizations applied on a galaxy-wide scale lasting millennia. For an author to think of something like this and to put it into a scope that we can read, it's hard to believe someone can do this, but Asimov pulls it off, and it's amazing. My final one for you today is another one that I didn't really enjoy, but the longer I've been away from it, the more I've come to appreciate it, and I think I maybe even have judged it too hardly when I finished it. And that's the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. 3 books published in 2015, 2016, 2017. Bam, bam, bam. This is post-apocalyptic science fantasy. Just think about that. What's hard about it is its complex world building. You do not understand what's going on for quite a ways into the book. It has a very unconventional narrative style, especially in book 1. The actual writing being in second person is not something we commonly see, so people find it a little jarring and difficult to know what's going on and feel comfortable with the reading. And it's a heavy book. This trilogy, emotionally heavy themes that you don't read the Broken Earth trilogy and enjoy yourself. You get moved, you get touched, you think deep things, but you don't smile. It's hard. So what's excellent about it? Well, each of these books won the Hugo Award for the best novel of the year. The themes of systemic oppression, survival, resilience over this grand scope of a post-apocalyptic world setting, very impressive, very original, makes some strong statements that apply to everybody today. So, yeah, that's another one that not everybody's going to be able to get through, but if you find it's for you, you're going to have a reading experience like none you've had before. Well, those are the 10 that I thought I'd bring to you here today as challenges, some of the toughest that are out there, but from which you might get the most you'll ever find out of anything you read. Do you already have experience with some of these? Are you the brave few who have made it through and have a story to tell? Use the comment box. Let me know. Do you agree with everything on this list, or are there some you're like, nah, that was easy. There's nothing deep there. That is not worthy. Okay, use the comment box there too. I love pros and cons in the comments, and I'll respond to anything that comes my way as long as you're kind about it. While you're down there, look in the show notes for all the other ways that you can interact with Zach and I. And we even have a Patreon page. Thank you to those of you who are Patreon supporters and provide a little extra to us every month, helping us afford to keep this stuff coming at you. If any of you want to explore what it means to be a Fantasy for the Ages patron, just check out the link to Patreon. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.